Morning,
Kumlan
morning.
Mara. Today's daf is daf Chava. We are up to the Mishnah. We're continuing to learn the laws about neighbors, that they shouldn't encroach in the neighbor's property or be the cause of harm in the neighbor's property. And we had a machlekes Rabbi Yosi and the Rabbanon. To what extent the halachas Rabbi Yosi that the only time you're responsible is if it's gila delay. If it's happening immediately or is directly from you. But planting a tree and the roots eventually crossing the boundaries, then you're permitted. But even according to Rabbi Yossi, at the end of the day, if you cause damage, you still have to pay for the damage. Just that you're allowed to do it. Says the Mishnah. You should not plant a tree next to the field of your friend. You need 4 amos. And why do we need 4 amos? So that you have room to move your plows around the tree to do whatever work you need to do. So it's for the plows. That's what it's for. Echad, we're not talking about a boy next door. Echad gefanim ve'echad kol ilan. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about vines. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about any tree. You always have to, this is 4 amos. And why? To be able to work around the tree. If there was a fence in between them, and we say a fence, we don't mean a 4 amos wall. We're talking about a 10 tfachim partition. Then you can bring it as close as possible you want to the ged and the other one as well, because you're not anyway going to bring your plow over there. In the Gemara previously we had, according to one opinion, according to Rav at least, that there was a tsuma, there was a rock there. That's why you're allowed to bring it all the way up to so the roots are not going in at all beyond the boundary. And there's a machlekes shaynim over here as well. When we say you're permitted, what about climb? Why aren't we worried? Okay, we're not worried about damage. Why aren't we worried about the plowshare? But why aren't we worried about climb? So according to Rashi, there is no climb when it's below the ground, only above the ground, so it's not an issue. And according to other shaynim, it's an issue below the ground as well. So it must be talking about a case of tsumma, where there's a rock there, or it's the same species. What happened? The roots already are pre-existing in the neighbor's field. The neighbor has every right to dig 3 tfachim into his ground, even though he's hurting some of the roots of the tree. But he has a right to have his plow go over there, and the plow generally digs in the ground, so he needs about 3 tfachim. But if the guy next door wants to do more than just 3 tfachim, he wants to dig himself a pit, which obviously has to be a lot more than 3 tfachim, then Taitzitz has every right to go down and cut part of the roots. The Yadin, it goes down as much as he needs. But the tree, the wood that he cuts off from the roots belongs to him. Now, it's not clear who's the him. Is the him the one who is digging it up, the neighbor, or is the him the owner of the tree? Is it the owner of the land who owns the roots? Or is the owner of the tree? And the Gemara will discuss that soon. We learned, why do we need 4 amos? We're up to the Gemara over here. We're saying that if you're planting a tree next to the field of your friend, you got to give us this is the 4 amos. Why? In order to work around the tree, to be able to turn over the soil. Amar Shmuel says Shmuel, Lo Yishanu, this is not talking about Ela B'Eretz Yisrael, only Eretz Yisrael. But a bubble, all you need is 2 amos. And Rashi says, because in Eretz Yisrael they use larger plows rather than in bubble. And the Shayim explained Rashi why in Eretz Yisrael you need larger plows, because the land, the soil is much more rocky and hilly. So you need to therefore you need a lot more work and effort than in bubble, where it's not so rocky and hilly. So there 2 amos is sufficient. You learned, you shouldn't plant a tree next to the field of your friend. Let's say this is 2 amos. But not now. We learned elsewhere in our Mishnah right here. Arba amos need 4 amos. How do you reconcile the 2? Like we said, Shmuel said, Alav Shmuel, Shema Mina. There's an ayat to Shmuel. And we had the same style in the Gemara a few times already, where we bring 3 different versions of how to come to the same conclusion. The Acharim tried to understand, is there nafka mina between these 3 versions or not? Because the third version is that was posed as a question. Tanan in our Mishnah says, this is 4 amos. But Tanya in the Bryce we learn Shtei amos. Shmuel answers as an answer. It's not a comment in our Mishnah, and then we prove to Shmuel, support Shmuel. It was actually initially a question, and Shmuel gave a response. Like Kasha, the Gemara relates a story now. Rava bar Rav Chanan, Rava the son of Rav Chanan, Havale Hana Dikla. He had these palm trees, Amitza the Parditza Rabbi Yosef, on the boundary of the orchard of Rabbi Yosef, of his grapes. Rabbi Yosef not having much luck, because a few days ago we had another neighbor who had these crows that were jumping onto him, and they were doing bloodletting there. So anyway. How the Osset came these birds, these pigeons, Yasvi bedikla, they sat on the palm tree, V'nochti bepardisa. From there they flew across to the vineyard of Rabbi Yosef, consuming his grapes. Umafsida caused him a hezek. On Malay, so Rabbi Yosef called in Rav and he said, Zil kites, I want you to chop down your palm trees so that the birds cannot use that as a launching pad. On Malay Varachikili, I follow the Mishnah. I follow the Mishnah, 4 Amos. On Malay, Yosef said, Hani milili lonas. That only applies tree to tree. But tree to grapes, the Mishnah is not talking about. So he understood. Rav understood the Mishnah simply that the Mishnah clearly says that all you need is a get of 10 tvachim. So if we're worried about the birds from the tree going to the grapes of the next tree, then we need a wall 10 tvachim is not going to suffice. So obviously we're not worried. We're not worried at all. So therefore, he understood from the Mishnah, there's no problem having his palm trees near the grapes. But Rabbi Yosef said the Mishnah is not talking about such a case. The Mishnah is talking about tree on one side, trees on the other side, grapes on one side, so the birds have nowhere to land, the grapes on the other side. The Mishnah was not discussing a tree to grapes. And anyway, told him to remove it. Big machlekes is showing him if Rabbi Yosef was saying it al pi halacha or just midas chassidus. Some say it's only midas chassidus because al pi halacha we just said according to Rabbi Yosef that it's the nizik that has to move, not the mazik. So why should the Rava have to move his trees? He's not damaging it; it's happening, by itself. Others say no, this is even the halacha, not just midas chassidus. He was demanding halacha because this is like gita delay. This is like every time you're under the trees and you make some noise, so the birds move and they jump next door. Every time you're picking dates, for example, you're causing the birds to fly away and they go to the grapes. So it's gita delay, and therefore min hadin you should move your palms. Anyway, so the Gemara says, we learned Echad Gefani. Said the Braisa clearly, it says in the Mishnah Echad Gefani, Echad Kolun. The Mishnah clearly says whether it's grapes or whether it's any tree. What's Rabbi Yosef saying there? Amalehani mili ilon ilon, tree to tree. Ukfanim lekfanim, on both sides were grapes. Aval ilon lekfanim bin a tree, but a tree to grapes, you need a lot more than for amas because of the birds. Amalek said, I said to him, fine. Anola kayatzna. I am not going to cut the tree down. Why? Because we had in the laws about tashchis that you're not allowed to cut down a fruit-bearing tree. And then we learned that even in, because his son of the Amar Rav, the same thing we had there. High dikla the toyin kava, any decal, any palm tree that can produce a kav of dates. Also you're not allowed to cut it down. And the said, shichvas. By my son, who's called Chikras, what an interesting name. Bri, my son didn't pass away. Ella the Kostanisha, I cut down this tree prematurely, a fruit-bearing tree prematurely. So he said to Rabbi Yosef, you go cut it yourself. I'm not going to cut it. So the machlekes of Shainim is where the halacha says that you have to cut it down because it's causing damage. Does that override Baltashchis? If you learn that it was midas chassidus, what Rabbi Yosef said, that's why they're learning that way. That's why the Rava said, I'm not going to cut the tree down. Midas chassidus is a very nice thing, but I'm not going to cut it down. But if the halacha would have been that for me to cut it down, then even though it's about tashkas, I would have cut it down. That's one shit in the shining. The other shit in the shining, McClung is that no, that even if the halacha says so, you don't cut it down. You don't cut it down. The only time you cut it down is if it's worth more without the tree than with the tree. But over here, just because the halacha says so, it's not grounds. So you still over about tashchas, and therefore he didn't cut it, nor did Rabbi Yosef cut it. Papa. Papa had these palm trees. I missed it on the boundary of Rahuna Shua. Now remember, Papa and Rahuna Shua are best friends, but they constantly, when it comes to money matters, they're constantly quarreling, which is quite amazing. Ozil, he went Ashke, he found Papa went and he found Avachofer, the Koyich Roshev. He saw that Abhuna, his best friend there, was on his side of the property, was going out and cutting through his roots, the Papa's tree's roots. Hi, what's this? It says in Fashion Mishnah, if your neighbor's roots are encroaching into your property, you have every right to go ahead and dig out 3 tvachim, shouldn't prevent the plow from working. That's 3 tvachim. But you're doing a lot more than 3 tvachim. Amalei said, "I'm not boy to shichin and meidas kachafarna." Here, the Mishnah continued saying, "But if you want to dig a hole, you're entitled to more than 3 tvachim." That's what my intention is. Just now, you're choifer boy shich and meidas. If you're going to go ahead and dig up these different shapes of holes, koitzitz, you go ahead and you cut it. The yoydi, you go down for 8 shloi. So it's clearly, I'm not limited to 3 tvachim, and that's my intention. Papa then said, I brought him one rai after another rai that he was wrong, and I couldn't overcome him. I couldn't win him in the argument. Until I threw the following, and I put a spanner in the works, and he stopped. I said to him, "Hodam Rav Yehuda," this famous thing Rav Yehuda said, and we had it in Maniach and other places, and like we also had before. If you have a boundary between two fields, there used to be the boundary. They used to raise it with rocks, lift it above or lower it so that it was clearly marked the two fields, and then people started traversing it as a shortcut to go to the next field. So, you have no right. That's like an easement, and you have no right to ever to demolish the easement. After and so therefore, since what Papa was trying to say, according to Rashi's view, other Shem don't like it, is that since I already have these roots already there, have like a chazakah for a long time, you cannot come along and to cut it down. So that's what Papa that's what Papa said, and used it, and Avuna therefore stopped. Then later Abuna thought about it. He said, "Oi, Amayla Amla, I should have responded, and I should have countered that by saying Kan betoich sheish esre amma. I should have said that the tree. You're right. The tree nurtures the first 16 amas. Doesn't matter the roots go 20 amas, 30 amas, but the nurturing of the tree is the first 16 amas, and that's what you have a chazaka on. Fine, but outside of a chutz sheish amma, but outside 16 amas, you no longer really have a chazaka. It's not nurturing, and have every right to cut it down. And where I was digging this hole was beyond the 16 amas, but I should have said that, and I didn't think of it. That's how Rashi learns. Taisus and most Rishonim don't like Rashi at all because say, what are you comparing a Meitzer Shechzika by Rabbim to an individual? There it's a public space. People, the Rabbim, use that, traverse that particular boundary, so therefore it's been done for a long time. They have a right of easement. Here we're talking about one individual to another individual. Where do we find that because he did something for a while? In fact, we had before, there's no Chazaka by Nezikin and all that kind of stuff. So how do you know that you can have the same thing? So therefore, the Rishonim have a different shayla here altogether. And what do you call it? It's talking about a case here where actually he was digging in the Rosh Hashanah, and Rab Huna himself was digging in the Rosh Hashanah, and in that section of Rosh Hashanah were the roots of Rab Papa's tree, and therefore he was saying here that and he was trying to dig a hole, and that's the whole thing in the Gemara. And at the end, he said, "Look, the Papa said you can't touch it. Everybody's using it. Don't leave it alone." And I made a mistake because the Shus Harabim, even though let's say the Shus Harabim is 30 amas wide, and the people have been using it, all you have to allow them is what we learned in Erevin, the status of Shabbos. The state of Shus Harabim is 16 amas wide, so I have to leave them 16 amas, but not. I don't have to grant them any more than that. I could have said that, but I didn't think of it. Saying about it further. Who's Shalai? Boy Yaakov Hadaiva. Yaakov from the city of Hadaiva. Asked Rav Chizda, Eitzim Shemi, who owns the wood? The owner of the tree or the owner of the land? Amaleh, he said back to him. So Rav Chizda said, Tinasur, where's it in? It says, let's say, Shar Ilam Shal Hedyid, Haboyim Shal Hedyid. You have a property that belongs to an ordinary person, to a private citizen, and the roots are going into the property next door, which belongs to Hegdish. Somebody donated to Hegdish. Is the din is loinanin. You cannot have any hana from those roots midrabanan because it's inside the property of the Hegdish. But if you did, you're not over stealing from Hegdish. You know why? Because the roots don't belong to Hegdish. Who do they belong to? The owner of the tree. But Rabbanan, we don't want you to have hana because it doesn't look right. It's sitting in the property of the Hegdish. So what does he clear from here? Who owns the roots? The owner of the tree. So when we say the Eitzim Shalai, we mean the owner of the tree. So he said, as Gemara concludes, after the tree, that's why it's not Mila, because it belongs to the owner of the tree. If you say it belongs to the owner of the property, then why aren't you considered stealing from Hegdish? The property belongs to Hegdish. Okay, so the Gemara tries to conclude from there that the owner of the tree owns the roots, regardless of where the roots end up. So the Gemara says, Elamai, so what are you trying to say? You're trying to say we go after the trees. Let me ask you a question. It seems that Yaakov is asking him. Let's continue that mission. It says there, what about the other way around? Shall Hegdish, the tree belongs to Hegdish, Habayim shall Hegdish, and the roots are growing into the property of the Hegdish. Loinanin, it says the same thing. Now, loinanin, you shouldn't have no because it originated from a tree in Hegdish, but if you use it, you're not stealing. Now, think about it. If the roots belong to the tree and the owner of the tree is Hegdish, and if you in any way use those roots for firewood, for example, you're stealing from Hegdish if it belongs to the tree. Why aren't you stealing? Must be that this Mishnah has nothing to do with the owner of the tree or the owner of the property who owns the roots. Why? You know what the Mishnah is talking about? Bigidulin. Must be because it's steer in the beginning and the end. It belongs to the tree, belongs to the land. So it must be the mission is not discussing the roots of the tree, it's talking about the aftergrowth. And the question is, when you donate something to Hegdish, that all becomes a person consecrated it. What about the things that add on, that grow later, the other layers? Is that also has all the din of Hegdish, or do we say it does not have the din of Hegdish because nobody consecrated it? Begedulin haboyin la'achem mekanas kim. We're talking about the growth, the aftergrowth. The kasava, and this mission holds, ain't mi'ila begedulin. There's no stealing by aftergrowth. So you cannot bring a raya one way or another. That either way, the reason why there's no me'ila here, I don't care whose property it ends up in, the property of the Heged, the property of the Hegdish, we're talking about the aftergrowth, and because a person was not magdish it, therefore it does not have the din of Hegdish, there's no me'ila. But in Rabbanan there is, and therefore you shouldn't have enough from it. And there's a machlekes in the Gemara, whether there's me'ila by aftergrowth, does it become Hegdish or not? And this Mishnah holds it doesn't. Says the Gemara, Ravina says like Kasha. Ravina says that there's no stay between the two. The first part of the Mishnah says, let's go back, no, we're talking about the roots. The first part of the Mishnah says we go after the tree, and therefore if it belongs to the Heged and ends up in the Hegdish is probably not a problem. And the second part of the Mishnah says that we go after that if it's the Hegdish's tree and it goes in the Heged, again, there's no problem. How do we reconcile that? I'll tell you. The first 16 amma belongs to the tree, and therefore if it's the Heged's tree and 16 ammas and Heged belongs to the tree, and it's not Hegdish, it's Heged. In the second case, where we say the Hegdish's tree entered the Heged's property, why there's no Hegdish there if it goes after a tree? Because chutz l'sheish esei amma. We're talking about roots that go beyond the 16 ammas, and therefore it's not part of the tree. So we can still talk about roots, not talk about aftergrowth. Amaru Zazula. Ilan, a tree, asamach lemeitza, a tree that is near the boundary, betoich sheish esei amma, within 16 amma, gazlan, you're stealing the nutrients of your neighbor. If the first 16 ammas, the roots are sucking out the nutrients, and you're stealing from your neighbor because it's taking nutrients from your neighbor. But the ain mevi'in mimena bekurim. You cannot bring bekurim from it, even though the roots belong to a tree, because you can't say the land ashenasatili, because it's actually sitting in your neighbor's land. So the Gemara, how does Ula know this? Because it says in the Pasuk, this is not Artzach. How do you know this? Is it Miditnan? Now, how do you know the tree extends all the way there, and therefore you cannot say Ma'artzach? Is it Miditnan? We learned Es in the Tis. Hamafuzoris. But the din is that generally you have to stop preparing before Shemitah from Pesach or from Shavuos, depending what kind of field it is. But if you have young saplings, we allow you to continue cultivating the land until Rosh Hashanah, because it's not going to be ready Shemitah. You're not preparing for Shemitah. You're actually just establishing the field, making sure that it's going to last for a long time. So you're allowed to. And what's considered the sapling field? Es in the Tis. And how much land in between can you work with? Es in the Tis. 10 plants, 10 saplings. Hamafuzoris b'toir beisa, that are scattered in an area which is a beisa. Beisa is, like we looked in Michigan, 50 ammas by 50 ammas, 2,500 square ammas. So if you have 10 trees there, which means each tree has 250 square ammas of land around it. So if you have 10 trees scattered in a beisa, chorshin kol beisa, you're allowed to plow the entire beisa, bishvilon, because of these 10 trees, ad Rosh Hashanah. You can go all the way up to Rosh Hashanah. Kama havilahu, how much the total? Today, alter the chamish me'egamidi, 2,500 amas. The chol chavdekad kama matla. So every tree, how much do they have? Mosar v'chamshin. They have 250. They have 250 amas. Now, so that's what is that what you so therefore every tree is entitled to 250. So let's work it out for a second. What did Ula say? You have 16 amas to every side. The tree's an epicenter. If you make a square, so 16 amas to the right, 16 amas to the left means 32 amas, length, and then you have 16 to the width, so you have 32 to the width. 32 by 32 is over 1,000, 1,024. Over 1,000 square amas. Here it says only 250. A tree is only entitled to 250 square amas. How's Ula come along and say no, that a tree is entitled to over 1,000 square amas around it? Allah Habidul, and you're saying therefore you can't say it's not Ula. Because Ula says that a tree needs 16 amas for sustenance, and therefore it's stealing from the neighbor. You cannot say Artzachot because the neighbor's land, and yet here we say a tree doesn't need that much. A tree only needs 250 amas for sustenance. So you might have element maybe Ula is based on the following Mishnah. If you have 3 trees, Shagimu b'nei Adam, from 3 people, the 3 different owners, they all combine the chorshin, and you can plow kol beisa b'shvila, and you can plow the entire beisa for them. And this is now called as day Elon, a field of the trees. And when till Shavuos. from this rules. So we see from that what? That 3 trees share a besa. So 3 trees share 2,500 square amas. That means each tree has 833, which is a lot more than 250. Kama havalu tre alpha megamid. You just said it's 2,500 amas. L'chol chad l'chad. Kama modules each tree. How much does each tree need for nourishment? Tamni meya v'tlusin. So a third of 2,500, which is 833 and a third. So therefore, it's closer to Ula. Whereas it's still not close enough because Ula said 1,024. A tree needs that much for nutrition, the soil around it. And here we see that's only 833. Akatin efficient in Ula. Ula is much more. Whereas a light duck, he wasn't so pedantic, he wasn't so particular, says the Gemara. But Ula's conclusion is making it lenient that you don't have to bring it to Bikurim. When you say we're not particular lechumra, when you're being strict, or lakula to be lenient, say, well, even though halacha the tree only needs 833 and a third amas, but you know what? We're gonna go and expand on that, make it over 1,000, and you don't have to bring it to Bikurim. Where do you find that you're not going to be accurate and you're going to be lenient? Me amrinan. Lakula ladok me. I mean, who say that? Said the Gemara. Misav. Who told you be ribua coming in? Who told you we're talking about a square? Be igula coming in. You decided a square 16, 16, 16. No, we're talking about an igula, a circle where this is the diameter. 16, 32 amas is the diameter. And merdi. And if you have a circle within a square, inscribed in a square, is a quarter less than a square. So if it's 1,024, then or whatever it is, then you subtract it by what's exactly what it is. It's 1,024, and you subtract it by what do you call it? By a quarter, you'll get 768. So Ula actually is talking about 768, even though the Mishnah said 833 and a third. So Ula actually is much closer, but Ula is being machmer, not being mekel. Because Ula is saying 768, that's all you don't have to bring Bikurim. Beyond that, you do. But even if you want to be technical, it's really 833 and a third that you don't have to bring Bikurim, because that's how much soil you need around the tree. So Ula wasn't particular, and he was being machmer. That's what it concludes here. Me sava b'dabur coming in. Sorry, me sava. Do you think b'dabur? We're talking about a square, be gula coming in, a circle. Mechdi, kama mruba yisar legal. How much is a square more than a circle? It'd be a quarter. Partial zayin meya b'shisha tamnaya. So according to Ula, it's 768. That's 3/4 of the square. Akati poshle palgad amsas. If you really work it out, Ula said 16 amas. Really, you should have said 16 and a half amas to be more accurate. Hainu deloy dog. He didn't go into fractions. He said 16 amas in every direction. You don't have to bring, but he should have said 16 and a half. But he wasn't particular. And he was not particular lechumra, because now he says beyond 16 amas you have to bring bekudim, when really up to 16 and a half amas, of the tree you don't have to bring bekudim, because you can't say artzacha. Okay, we'll stop here. We'll continue tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem.